The Valkyries.
Yeah.
Ooh, strong name. Strong name. Who else has an idea for the WNBA team? Veronica? Do you have one? I don't know. The Fog? The Fog is cool. What? Who else has it? Yeah, you got it. What you got? What do you think? What should our new team be called?
The ladies in the masquerade.
I love what's happening in this room right now. I can't describe it exactly, but the ladies in the masquerade. Let's get one more idea for the name for. What are some other names? Honestly, we could do better than Golden State Warriors, though. Come on. I said it. All right. What is your name, and what should the name of our WNBA team be?
San Francisco Splash.
Splash. Cool. That's giving me water park realness. Yeah, okay, yes.
San Francisco Tsunami.
Tsunami. Okay. There's a theme. Fog, tsunami, splash. Are we ready to get this show on the road? Yeah. Veronica, let's bring Veronica up to stage. This idea was Veronica's idea. She's our head of programming. If you're glad to be here, it's because of her.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Manny's. Like Manny said, my name is Veronica. I run programming here. This is an event that I am so excited about. I grew up at Maples Pavilion watching the Stanford women's team go Card, and as soon as I saw that the WNBA was coming to San Francisco, I said, well, we have to bring them to Manny's too. We are so excited to have some amazing people on the stage. We have the CEO of the Women's Sports Foundation, the president of the new team, and an amazing reporter they will be introducing themselves. But I also wanted to let you know about a couple other events we have coming up in the space. Tomorrow we'll be having a conversation with the Chronicle talking about the future of Union Square. Next Friday, we will also be having Congressman Maxwell Frost, who is a Gen Z representative from Florida, who will be in the space. And later in May, get excited, we have Kara Swisher coming to the space to talk about her new book. Woo! So thank you so much for being here. We hope you get a lot from this conversation and are as excited as we are about the new team. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Veronica. I'm Megan Rose Dickey. I'm a reporter with Axios San Francisco, and I'm super pumped to be here today. I'm very excited for the WNBA to come to the Bay Area. And is everyone else excited? How are you feeling? Awesome. So as Veronica said, I'm here with Jess Smith, president of the Bay Area's WNBA team. And can you hear me okay? Yeah? A little closer? Like this? Okay, for sure. And I'm here with Danette Leighton, CEO of the Women's Sports Foundation. Yeah. All right, so it seems like y'all are probably up to speed with what's happening, but just some quick facts. So we're getting a WNBA team, and that's very exciting. And the inaugural season is next year. And I feel like those are like the two facts that you definitely need to know for this conversation. Okay, so I think everyone can agree with me that the most burning question, and I just have to get right to it, is there a team name?
Great question. I like how Kimberly Veal is just staring at me, by the way. She's our head of communications. She's like, what are you
I already told her
now?
I was going to ask you this.
See the arms crossed? This is my life. The answer is we're close, right? So the team, even since I began here in January, has been really working hard at finding a name with the brief of something that gives a nod to the Warriors, of course. They're an incredible organization. The ownership group that has come in has done great things. They're a global brand, and yet something that stands on its own. The WNBA did a great job with that, with the hoodie. When you see somebody wearing that orange hoodie, you know there's a shared value set, and we don't take that for granted in the opportunity to build in the Bay. And so a name and a logo and an identity and a color scheme, that's hard work, because what we're representing is the Bay Area. Like how this room feels, like this is the best, so thank you so much for coming here to learn more about us. This is how I want our stadium to feel, our arena to feel every single game day, but with 18,000 people like this together. And so for us, when we think about the Bay, and we think about what's happening in women's sports, and specifically in women's basketball and the communities that it represents, it's, the Bay leads the world in being progressive and being innovative at the same time. And so how are we marrying all of those things through something that fans feel like they can identify with? So that was a very long answer to maybe.
But it sounds like there is a name.
Man. Wow, hard-hitting question. She's like, I'm literally
Holly,
only asking
Holly
one
Rowe
question
of
today.
ESPN said, "Oh, I know the name, but I can't say."
Yeah. There are, like, listen. Yeah, right? Holly Rowe. What the heck, man?
Blame Holly Rowe.
Yes.
Yeah.
When will we know
will
is probably the better question as we're nearing some of those details. And all I can say is soon. You know, we are hard at work. We're adding employees. We are talking to candidates for our GM. You know, there are some big things happening in the very near future. You can expect summertime to feel very, very dedicated to one thing after the next thing of what we're going to be releasing.
Okay, for sure. I'll leave it at that for now. But I might be returning.
She's like, Danette, what's their team name?
Yeah, and so Danette, I wanted to put this question toward you. So obviously, I mean, the NCAA women's tournament was like, the viewership was historic. And so what do you think that sort of signals about where women's sports is today?
So I'll give some context. Can you guys hear me okay? So I don't know if you all know who the Women's Sports Foundation is, but you're probably going to know who my boss is and who our founder is, and that's Billie Jean King. So the reason why I share that is that go Billie, and she's the best boss in the world. She's exactly as you would describe her to be. She's unbelievable. But Billie founded our organization 50 years ago. It's actually our 50th anniversary, 2 years after the passing of a very important bill called Title IX. We are not, everything that happened in March Madness, everything that's been happening in women's sports is not a coincidence. We have been playing women's sports now for 52 years, and that is very, very, very important. And we are thrilled to see the momentum that's behind women's sports. And I just got back from Cleveland. I saw the Cleveland saw it. I know Stanford, I'm sorry, didn't go where Stanford wanted. But I think what was exciting about Cleveland, I've been a part of the sport of women's basketball for most of my career. So there used to be a WNBA team in Sacramento. I was Jess for that team for 10 years. So seeing the Bay Area finally get a WNBA team is very personal and very special to me, and I hope all those Monarchs fans from Sacramento come down and take advantage of being season ticket holders here and supporting this Bay Area team. But I also ran the Women's Final Four in '99, which was in San Jose, and that's the last time women's basketball and that Final Four has been in the Bay Area. So this is such an opportune time. San Francisco has needed a WNBA team for a very long time. It is a right market. It is a perfect market for women's basketball. And it's so fun to see the momentum that has come off of it. But I think it's really important that we have to keep our foot on the gas. And I think that's something that we've seen a lot of peaks and valleys in women's sports. And I've unfortunately have experienced them myself. Even the folding of a W team in Sacramento was one of the worst days of my career. But the opportunity we have right now is it takes every single one of you. And every single one of you needs to be buying gear, buying tickets, becoming a season ticket holder of the W team, and investing in women. And when you invest in women, you will see great things happen. And I think that's what was really brilliant about Cleveland and brilliant about watching women's basketball. It was finally the time that it wasn't just one player. We heard a lot about one particular player, and I think she did an amazing, obviously Dawn Staley said it best, but seeing South Carolina with that roster that they have winning the national title, seeing Caitlin Clark, Juju Watkins, Kiki Rice, there was so many big names in women's basketball this year and women's college basketball, and I like to say it's just about damn time that people are paying attention.
And I'll just add to that, when people think about what's happening right now, I also think there's two tactical things at play. And you referenced it. Like, one is the consumer. Like, during COVID, everyone woke up in a different way at the same time together and understanding the consumer power. What we watch, what we follow on social media, who we bring up into our communities, the tickets that we buy, the merchandise that we buy, it matters. And you're seeing the power of that come to the forefront, and that's being met with investment, right? And making sure, for so long in women's sports, I've worked in the sports industry, mostly men's teams, for almost 20 years. And I've been at the table many times when organizations were thinking about investing in women's sports and unfortunately didn't make that decision. And what was most infuriating about that is that thought process was, well, if we do this, how do we not lose money? Who approaches any business that way? No one, right? No matter what your product is. And now it's been, and I come from Angel City, I was just there the last 4 years before joining here. What an incredible experience that was to learn from. And it was really this unlock of, well, what if we build it to make money? Like, hear me out. What if not, instead of worrying about selling 4,000 tickets, we sell out the stadium? And let's make sure we're investing in what that feels like and drawing in the fans and respecting the fans that have been there waiting to be called in to be a part of that.
For sure. And yeah, I want to circle back to something, Danette, that you said just about, you know, for everyone in this room, like, buy merchandise, like, get season tickets, and really, like, support the WNBA financially. And I guess with that, would that help with pay equity for WNBA players?
Yes.
Or, like, what is it going to take? Okay. Is that the only thing?
No, I
is
think
it-
what
or is there
people
more to
don't
it?
understand is that, and Jess alluded to it, and for all of us that have worked in women's sports for a really long time, the biggest challenge that we've had is we've been forced into traditional metrics and traditional metrics of how men's sports has been sold. So all of us, both Jess and I, have worked on both sides. And I love men's sports. Doesn't mean that I don't. But the traditional metrics have been very challenging for us to meet because we haven't had the access. So the first was linear television, right? Linear television is 24/7. There's only a certain amount of windows. In order for you to get engagement, you must have visibility. But the windows weren't there for the women, and a lot of times we were fighting to get a decent time slot. And so what really changed was when digital media and more disruption in the media space came, there were more opportunities for women to be seen. So that's one part, but that's only one piece of the revenue pie of the sports business model. Rights and viewership, which is why we, on this side, were so excited to see the numbers over the last couple years. And it's not just what happened in women's basketball. You can look at the World Cup, you can look at it, all these different sports, the sellouts, the merchandise numbers, the jersey, the need that when consumers want something, then brands want to invest. When you invest, brands want to invest, advertisers want to invest, that lifts up the money all the way through, which will then allow teams to be more profitable, to be profitable. I agree with Jess that the frustrating part in women's sports for so long is they saw us as a cause. We're not a cause, we're a business. We should be seen as a startup. And that opportunity will help raise the salaries, that will help raise pay equity. And that for Women's Sports Foundation is very, very important. We care about all aspects, every women's sports, but we care about the access point in the youth, to high school, to college, to pros. And if the elites can keep the elite sports and the WNBA teams and the Bay Area teams can become best practices, it filters everywhere. But people are shocked when I say it takes every individual. You have to go buy a jersey. You have to go buy a ticket because it starts the momentum in the right direction. And then those bigger numbers start coming from the brands and the advertisers who want to invest in TV rights deals, sponsorship deals, and then everything starts to get lifted up.
And yes, to every single thing that you said. And I think the other piece of that is there's so many metrics that we're comparing the products of men's sports to women's sports as like A and B. And the reality is they're completely different products. And there's all these measurement tools that are only looking at media and impressions, et cetera, but aren't looking at the value set and what that means, and aren't looking at the fact that this is an entirely different consumer. The crossover is not as big as you think. The audience is different. And so often when we're out in the marketplace, I'll share a story of my time at Angel City. We were getting ready to go in the market to sell the front of the jersey. And you usually work with a traditional valuation company. There are many. And so you go out and say, okay, I really want to understand where you think we should be in the marketplace from a pricing standpoint, both comparative data, media value, all the different assets. And they came back and they're like, great news. We think this is going to be the top selling or the top valued jersey in the world for women's sports, and you can get $1 million for it. And I had most recently come from MLS, where there were teams that were selling low thousands of number of jerseys, low media rights values. And they were like, the base you should be getting is $2.5 million. And I was like, wait a minute, but like Natalie Portman's wearing this. We had such a different approach to it, and it really unlocked something that I think you're seeing women's sports take advantage of now in the right way, is that the product is actually a mix of sport and purpose and pop culture. And you can't take away the value that someone feels when a company supports a women's sports team, right? There's something that unlocks immediately because these consumers value that type of loyalty in a way that is also valuable in a way that drives the revenue. And having the right people in the rooms to ask for those dollars is a big piece of the puzzle too.
And I'm curious, like how do you plan to sort of navigate the cost of tickets while still wanting them to be like accessible to WNBA fans, and like, obviously it's like you're wanting to grow this brand. So how can you talk a little bit about what the ticket prices will be and
we're
how
working
you're
through that now. Yeah, and it's thinking through a variety of different fan experiences, right? So I think often what you come across in women's sports is people are like, just sell ticket or give away tickets. People will come, they'll understand the product, and then they'll buy later. You're immediately telling people what your product is worth by doing that. And also, you're not able to create the experience that brings them back, right? So we are really looking at, what does it feel like when you're sitting courtside? I mean, these athletes are global superstars. Let's think about what that feels like and make sure that we're valuing our product the right way to drive more revenue into the system. And of course, making it accessible to everybody. I think if we do our job correctly, when you look at our ticketed audience, it should mirror the SF Bay Area in all ways, and making sure that we are really passionate about what that audience looks and feels like.
Do you think the tickets will be as expensive as Warriors tickets?
No.
Okay. Well, that's
No.
good. That's good.
I mean, yeah. and listen, I mean, that franchise is a dynasty for the ages, right? State-of-the-art facility, everything about it, they're amazing. They're truly one of the best businesses, and I can say, being embedded into the organization now, they are elite at their craft and really good people, and I don't think you find that often. I think when you saw the press conferences last night from the players and the way they feel about potential changes coming, that was really, really evident. And so, but yes, we'll be completely, we will be more accessible than that for sure.
For sure.
And I think it's important to know that owners matter, and it is very, very evident that the owners, the W team, care deeply about this product, and they're not just doing it because they're doing this because they see this as a smart business, and they recognize this community is ready for it. So I think that's really important. From my own past experience, ownership is a big driver, and I think the Warriors ownership and now the W's ownership is significantly strong, and communities can really drive best practices, and you will be surprised on how much your voice matters and how much you can influence what happens here in the Bay Area to influence the rest of not just the WNBA market, but other women's sports pro teams, so that everybody can be lifted up. And that's what I really want to see is, of course, the Bay Area is my home, and Jess and everybody knows that they're going to be my team here in the Bay Area, and I care deeply for everyone. But when we create a best practice one place, it magnifies another place. So Kansas City Kerr and the NWSL have the first female facility. That's a big deal. Now we're having more conversations about how other NWSL teams can have publicly and privately funded facilities just for their product. And all those things matter is the women's sports ecosystem working together, because that has also been something that I've been very frustrated by in this space is everyone has worked in silos, but when we all collaborate, we lift everyone up, and that's something that's so powerful about women, period, and it's the opportunity about women's sports. And I think the Bay Area will be one of those best practices, and I'm thrilled, not just as a fan, but it's a great ownership group, great leadership. Jess was a fantastic hire. She did amazing things. People don't realize what she did at Angel City FC. She will dominate and make a fantastic business model here for W, and it's something that's going to be great for this franchise.
No pressure at all. No, but this ownership group, does anybody here remember the ABL basketball league?
San Jose Lasers.
Right, yeah, right? So Joe Lacob, the owner of the Warriors, he started a women's basketball league before the WNBA. He has been invested in the women's game for a very long time. Feels very serendipitous to every part of this organization to be building right now and to build within the Bay Area.
For sure. And yeah, Danette, you had mentioned earlier that the Bay Area and San Francisco is it's a good place to launch a new WNBA team. Could you talk a little bit more about why that is, why you think that?
Yeah, so I know they just beat the Warriors last night, so I'm sorry. But I spent a decade in Sacramento, and I watched that community very early on. We are a original franchise, and so I watched that community embrace the Monarchs. We were selling out buildings. We had a fan base that was unbelievably avid. We were loud. We won a world championship. It was very hard to see that franchise go away. And then when that franchise went away, we had so many Bay Area season ticket holders that would come to Sacramento. And we were always so shocked that we didn't have the same thing, like the Kings and the Warriors. There wasn't a W team in Sacramento and a W team in San Francisco. And then we went completely dry. That team folded in 2009, and it's 2024. And so this market, with the strength of Stanford women's basketball, USF, Santa Clara, Cal, it has been a women's basketball market for decades. It's been a women's sports market for decades, but particularly women's basketball, because the type of community and fan base is perfect for women's basketball. And so I've been shocked, literally sitting here going, why is there no W team? And so when this finally happened, I did a happy dance. I went to the press conference and was so excited because I actually think this will become one of the most dominant franchises in the WNBA because of this community.
Jess, I was hoping to talk a little bit about the draft process. So obviously this is a brand new team. How do we get players? What is that process like?
Yeah, great question. And for those of you like Danette that were at the press conference when the team was announced, Joel Lacob said we're going to win a championship in 5 years. So no pressure at all. He delivered that when he said the same thing when he bought the Warriors, so I'm just going to put it out there at the same time. You know, for us, first and foremost, we need to hire a GM, which we are close to doing. They're going to hire a head coach. We will have a culture kind of, you know, in place of what we're looking for there, recruitment, et cetera. But the tactics are expansion draft first. That will likely be in December. We don't have the details of number of players that will be protected yet, but that's where we get to go create a few rivalries and steal some players. Obviously, there's a few teams I would say are stacked right now, maybe the Aces and some others, right? Which would be really interesting to just see what type of talent we'll be able to take from them. Second to that is free. I already hate everybody. I'm like, hey, I'll take that and that one. And the second piece is free agency. It's a really interesting time for contracts in the WNBA. As the league is growing, as they're approaching the media deal, as there's a lot of upside, a lot of the star players are doing 1 and 2 year deals. And so we may come across a really interesting time where we could have some really great talent on the market come next January when we enter free agency. And then third will be the college draft that you just saw, but that we're seeing. I mean, this is such an incredible, you know, bringing the talent from college draft right now into the WNBA and merging those two groups together and seeing the camaraderie between the current W athletes and this, you know, group of players will be really special. And then we'll have a roster. So then, you know, join us in May and we'll see what we can do.
And so I want to dive in a little bit more into the expansion draft. So basically, you can steal players from another team. And how many can each team protect?
So we don't know yet.
Okay.
So we're waiting. We're working with the league to get some of those details. Details like what draft pick we'll even have in the college draft, how many players each team protects. The point of expansion, if it's done well, is that everyone's competitive, right? That the team coming in is competitive right away and not something that takes a while to kind of get there, given that they're building a culture from day one. And that yet the teams that are doing great right now also, you know, don't lose, you know, some of that advantage that they've worked really hard to do over the years. The most interesting thing, you know, a peek behind the curtain to think about for us is while we're the first expansion team coming out since 2008, you know, the commissioner has gone out and said there will be 4, you know, over the next number of years. So we're going to have to play some defense too, right? It's like, okay, like we want all those things, but then they can't have those things from us, you know? So, you know, those are all different strategies that we're talking about internally of what does that feel like not only next year, but in year 2, 3, 4, as this league goes from 12 to 16 teams, which is going to be incredibly exciting.
But I'll add to that, I think one of the challenges has been the W, if you guys are all women's basketball fans, the product is unbelievable, and a lot of amazing athletes don't make rosters now. So there are so many amazing athletes that I have no worry about this expansion draft obviously for the Bay Area team, but if 2 or 3 or 4 more expansion teams come in, it's time, because I don't like seeing some of these players not making rosters that are that talented. You will be shocked at who you saw not last night, the night before, how many of those don't make rosters. Like, people don't realize that. These amazing players in college that became such household names this year, you'll be surprised when you see some of them not make a roster, because it's going to happen because the talent is so good in the WNBA.
Yeah, and I want to circle back to just the fan base and building a fan base. And Jess, you were saying before we started that there's not, or what's the amount of overlap between like an NBA fan and a W fan?
Yeah, I mean, you can answer this question too from your time, but for so long, everyone's just assumed, you know, it's the same consumer. Like, oh, they're an NBA fan, they're going to be a WNBA fan. And then they're like, well, why is the audience smaller? They must just really not like the product. When the reality is there's a lot of casual fans that come from the NBA to the WNBA, but maybe not the people that are going to sign up for another 20 plus home games and a ticketing package after just coming to 40 NBA fans, and vice versa, by the way, WNBA fans like being casual fans of the NBA. And so there's a lot of misconceptions about that, number one. Should we answer it? Hey, it's me. Is it the draft? No. Is it Kathy? Yeah. You know, so when we think through audience, And what we're seeing in women's sports, we learned a lot about this at Angel City as well, is, and now that we have the data to do this, it's really helpful, is you have, of course, like Warriors fans. And when you look at the ticketed overlap, like through the country, you generally see like 15-ish% of somebody that's going to cross over from like a full ticketing package. But then we're going to look at other demographics. For us, we have to build a brand that, Danette touched on this, women's sports fans, not just basketball fans, but we want women's sports fans to feel at home inside our brand, our arena, and our community every single day. So we hope that that's what we represent there. And then the next one is, probably everyone here, and why this room is so special to me. It's this consumer that understands what it means to show up. Maybe you're not a sports fan. Maybe it's not something you've even followed to date at a close clip, or that you would show up and buy a ticket for. But this is something that you will, because you seek togetherness, you seek shared values, you seek supporting companies that mean something bigger than yourself, and something that allows you to represent yourself that way. So I think that's the focus in building, versus just basketball's basketball, NBA versus WNBA. And it's not just basketball, soccer has this same landscape as well.
And looking ahead to next year, so the draft will happen, and then we'll kind of get to know who's going to be on the team, and then free agency. But before all of that, the NBA All-Star Game is coming to San Francisco. Will there be any sort of, like, will the team kind of do anything as part of that experience?
Yes.
And what will it look like?
Kimberly Veal will be leading that. No, in all seriousness, what an incredible opportunity and platform. Like what we just saw with Steph and Sabrina happen, and I happened to be courtside for that experience. It was very powerful, right? That was everybody's most talked about, and you talk about this often and what that's meant. But that was the most, watched event that's happening, and everybody's talking about how to make it more. And now it's coming back to the Bay with both of them, Sabrina being from here, obviously Steph being Steph. And how are we expanding and understanding what that looks like? We're going to have our brand at that point. There's a few things not announced of just how we're going to integrate facilities, including a locker room inside Chase Center potentially, and some renovations in Oakland. So our brand will be front and center in many different places. But we expect our athletes that are with us to be everywhere. The athletes that are coming in that aren't on our roster, so you have different people taking place in the three-point contest to be in our locker rooms, with our branding there too. But more importantly, how are we hosting events, leading events, participating in events to really make sure that this brand and our community has a seat at that table too.
So I want to open it up to the audience and see if y'all have any questions.
I have to have one question of Danette while she's here.
Yeah.
Well, you have to share with this group specifically what we were just doing 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C. together, and what you led.
So obviously women's sports is a bit of a passion of mine, clearly. And so to lead this organization now has been really like a dream job for me, because I get to bring everything that I care so deeply about the business side, because I really care about the entire ecosystem for women's sports. And one thing that we haven't talked about here is that women's sports is this amazing community, but we've actually changed a lot of lives. It's a societal change. And when girls and women play sports, they lead. And that's really, at the end of the day, what we're starting to finally see 52 years later after Title IX. And I shared with Jess, the moment of Steph and Sabrina was compared a lot to Billie Jean playing Bobby Riggs. And so everybody always asks, well, what's the difference? And I said, well, when Billie had to play Bobby, she knew she had to win. And if you knew at that time, women couldn't get credit cards on their own. Women couldn't get their own mortgages on their own. And she knew it was critical that because there was so much sexism, unfortunately, at the time, she didn't have a choice but winning. But what was so brilliant about the Steph and Sabrina, so for me to watch Steph and Sabrina, not just because they're both amazing shooters, is that you saw both Steph and Sabrina grew up with women and men playing sports. They grew up with it. We obviously know that Steph's mom was an athlete, and we all know the story between Cameron Brink and Godmother and all of that, right? And you saw two elite athletes respecting each other for their game. They both can shoot. It was not a gender thing. That's what was so powerful about seeing how gender norms change, and when men and women are raised in that environment, what has shifted. So that's something that I think is very special about women's sports. So I had an opportunity. We do a lot of advocacy work, so we're in DC a lot, and we work a lot for protecting Title IX and other issues that are going to take rights away from women. At the end of the day, we're a women's rights organization, and we use sports as our platform because all of our issues usually translate outside of sport. And so thank you. It's very fun to use your voice like that, I have to say. But we got a lovely phone call from the vice president's office, and Vice President Harris wanted to co-host an event together. She'd been doing these celebrations around Pride and Women's History Month and Black History Month, and she had never done anything in women's sports. So she asked us to join her, and we had a very intimate gathering where we brought together women in sports and women sports and athletes and executives, and Jess was there, and Yo-Yo from the Warriors were there, and it was a mix of collegiate, professional, all these amazing women that are working in sports or have played at the highest levels. And we were there with Vice President Harris, and we brought the whole room together, and we celebrated the power of women's sports and the power of women in sports. So it's pretty fun.
We also confirmed she will be our fan. So
Yes. She is a Californian. And there is, she's going to be Bay Area over LA. Oh, did you confirm that?
I did.
Ooh, nicely done.
Probably not on the record for a bit, but
Nicely done.
It's on the record now. So.
whoops. At least it wasn't the team name. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, just you in the front.
You just brought up Oakland, and I know Oakland had put in a bid also. And so I'm wondering what you're doing to kind of involve that community in collaboration, and what happened with that. I mean,
Yeah, Oakland's incredibly important to us. And, you know, if you know anything about this ownership group, they do a ton of work within Oakland and San Francisco specifically. But more importantly, Oakland will be we get to have a home at two different places. So the practice facility that was in Oakland that the Warriors used up until 4 years ago will be our practice facility. We'll completely rebrand it. It will be our W Team's brand. There's 3 courts there. It's a beautiful space that they'll have access to 365. Our office will be there. You know, we'll have our own team. So we're not just a sister or a part of what the Warriors have built. We are our own entity, and that space will be a really big piece of that. And so with that, you know, the city of Oakland is important to us too. You know, we're going to be there a lot, you know, at the different establishments. So that's very important to us, for sure.
great. Good to
Thanks for
hear
asking. Now, yes, deposits are up. We announced a day and a half ago that we surpassed 6,000 seat deposits, and now a day and a half later, we are at 6,400 seat deposits. They are really starting to heat up. So that's your way to get in line. If you go to WNBA.com/Golden State, $25 per seat. Let us know like where you want to sit, and we'll probably start to sit people this summer as we kind of get that going. Now's the time. WNBA.com/Golden State. I love it. Real-time update here.
And you know there's competition because the Ace is sold out. So there's competition, Bay Area. Better get those season tickets deposits going.
First of all, thanks so much for being here. It's right down the street from my house. I have so many burning questions. I'm going to try to encapsulate, not overwhelm you, but I think as you saw earlier, I'm very much concerned about access for low-income people, of which we have many, including myself in San Francisco and the Bay Area. So I'm curious about how that is going to work in. But also, how is the whole pay equity thing going to happen? I mean, I know that with the men's teams, it took them, 100 years after it was first created for them to finally start seeing higher pay, right? And I think it's kind of ridiculous at this point. So how is that going to work for women? Do we need to catch up to where they are? If so, or if not, like how are we going to get there? Because obviously women's basketball, professional basketball hasn't been around as long as men's, and it took men that long to get there. So I'm curious.
No, that's a good question. And probably to back up from there, the way the leagues work is you have a league, and then you have a players association, which is a union of all the players, and then you have all the teams. And the teams are a subsidiary of the league. And so Danette kind of touched on this earlier, but it takes that entire ecosystem to be successful, and that involves investment from the top, that involves brands coming in, that involves ticket buyers coming in, merchandise buyers, involves media rights is a huge, huge piece of that. So watch these games, it really does matter. And as that begins to raise, that's where the players' unions can ask for more. The way the NBA eventually negotiated their contract with their players' union is they said, we want to win and lose together. So there was more revenue sharing opportunities between the two entities of when things are going well, we want the cap to be higher. We understand that's not always the case, and we'll take some of that as well. They're an incredibly successful league and doing great work. And so, you know, we believe the W is on the rise in some big ways through expansion and media in the near term. And once those things happen and when fans show up, the players can ask for more money. So pay equity, you can't steer away from it. I mean, it has to have money. Like there has to be money there to ask for, to make sure that it's funding the whole system.
Yeah, and I think the part that a lot of people like, they need to be seen as businesses. They're businesses, and in order for them to run, they have to have that revenue stream that's coming in. But everybody thinks they can't. Like, but what can one individual do? Like, we talk about season tickets, we talk about jerseys. Like, you'd be surprised of that voice you have, that viewership you watch. Like, we care when we see those numbers. Those numbers, the women's Final Four, were a big deal. Those numbers, because we haven't been in a position that fans have been able to watch in those time slots, and we're proving with having a lot of challenges and roadblocks, because we haven't had that access, that viewership is there for women's sports. So when you see this across the entire women's sports landscape, not just in women's basketball, it matters because advertisers and brands start paying more attention. And what I like to say is I want to have, like, a lot of us see some of these consistent brands that have been investing in women's sports, amazing brands that have been, but we need that pond of brands to become an ocean. We need every brand, every advertiser to understand the value of investing. That starts to lift up the team situation. After running a team and having my lights turned off, I can tell you it's the most painful thing in the world. And it's not that you don't want to have that pay equity for the players. It's just you have to prove the model that you can. And a lot of people also forget in the NBA, before the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird scenario, NBA wasn't like, they might have had a little bit higher salaries than we have now, but it still took them a while. But it really, at this point, we have some momentum, but I can't stress enough, if you don't have the fans and you don't have individuals pushing and driving, you drive whether or not a brand or an advertiser wants to invest in that women's sports property. It just, you do. And I don't think that many people realize how much power you actually have in your own hands. Agreed. Because that is how we're valued when going and doing a rights deal, when the WNBA is doing a rights deal with ESPN or somebody else, or they're going and doing a sponsorship deal, or just use the example of what her jersey, in MLS and in the NWSL was. Like, those need to be all elevated so that, the lowest common denominator is not what you want. You want that all. Then that goes back to the players. So it's just it's a system.
Exactly right. And then for the accessibility, we're definitely going to have accessible tickets. Making sure that we prioritize accessibility of this brand is a top priority. We know, when you look at women specifically, and not just the games, but to sport. Sport is so powerful, and obviously the work the Women's Sports Foundation does is such a testament to this. But 92% of women in leadership positions have had access to sport at some point in their lives. And we now know that data. And so when we say it's changing society, sport is doing that. The skill sets, the opportunity to be coached and have that type of resource is a very, very big deal. And so I'm the product of that, candidly. I grew up with a single mom who had me very young. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and I credit that to that I was mediocre at basketball. Comparative to the people that I'm around now, very good for a small town in upstate New York. But it matters. And I think understanding the core opportunity to provide sport to people and change society is a big deal.
I also think what's interesting with what's happening with women too, and their wealth has obviously they've had the ability to go to college, they've had the ability to grow and gain wealth. By 2030, women are going to control $30 trillion.
Let's go.
30 trillion are going to be controlled by women. That's a big deal because those become decision makers. Women want to invest in women. That is a game changer for not just women's sports, but women's, to give you another sad stat. So this is my WSF stat. I always knew how hard it was to sell women's sports early on, and the boulder we had to push up the hill to get people to listen to us. Then I came into philanthropy, and I found out that there are 55,000 girls and women serving organizations in this country. So that's like Girl Scouts, Women's Sports Foundation, anything around women's health, and we get 1.8% of the philanthropic money in this country. 1.8% goes to girls and women serving organizations that are philanthropic like us. All of those, you can start having that conversation in venture capital, private. Those percentages are very common across women-owned, women-specific things. So we're just saying, invest in women. It matters.
Jess, I was wondering what your views are about charter flights, and whether you think that's going to happen soon. And then just kind of maybe just a less serious question, but have any of the players who are going to be going into free agency privately told you that they've got their eye on? I know you can't I know you can't name names, but in a general sense, is there excitement and interest among some future free agents?
Yes, and I think a lot of those people think I'm the general manager, which is really hilarious. I was up in Portland for the Elite Eight, and many parents of people like, "Hi, I'm so excited to talk to you," and I was like, "I don't think you are." But yeah, I mean, you know, and that's on us. We want to, and you know, as we're interviewing these GM candidates and hearing why they'd want to be a part of this, like they have it right. Like this ownership group, this market, like this is the one that's going to set the tone. This is the see it, be it that will provide a roadmap for everyone else, and players want to be a part of that too. So I am really bullish on that, coupled with we're going to have some great corporate partners, and ultimately when you have that too, those corporate partners generally support the players inside endorsement deals. Is just kind of, to Danette's point, how the business works, right? So they want to have access to all the different rights that exist in a portfolio. I forgot your serious question. Charter. Oh, yeah. I was like, that one was more fun. Charter flights. I mean, they're important, right? And the players want them. And so it goes into the same bucket that we're talking about with pay equity, because they're also expensive. And so, you know, we have to be able to generate more money so that the players can ask for that, and the answer can be yes, is the simple answer. But it involves every team in the league and the players union coming together. And as things are growing, there's also like very active conversations between all the parties. Would you rather have this or this or this or that, or if this happens, that happens? So, you know, but it is being talked about, and Kathy's acknowledged that as well.
In the very back.
Thank you. I accidentally assumed that we'd be getting the first overall pick in the 2025 women's draft.
I wish you were so right.
And I looked at the 08 draft when Atlanta entered the fold, and they got the 4th pick, so that's not going to happen here, of course. But I guess, sorry. I guess what I wanted to ask was, so with the lottery, you know, it's based on how teams finish in the season. That's how they get their odds for when the lottery is selected. Since we're not going to be playing this upcoming season, do you know what kind of odds we get for the 2025 draft? Do we get first pick odds? And then, because I know on the NBA side, it's like the worst 4 teams have the best chance of getting the first pick. Are we going to have those kind of odds to get the first pick? Because I know, you know, we might not get the first pick like Atlanta didn't, but I guess what do our odds look like for that?
Great question. We don't know.
Okay.
But, you know, those are all the scenarios that we're working through, right? So if you think about expansion for the next 4 years, and you're an existing team, does the first pick always go for the next 4 years? And it might be obviously different teams in different years, by the way. I'm just using that as an example. But imagine that like the first pick is every year a different expansion team. Is that fair to the other teams that are building at the same time? Maybe, depending on like some of the scenarios and what expansion draft looks like, and are there more protected players versus a lottery pick? It's about balancing the assets of the expansion draft and the college draft to really make sure the league, to Danette's point, there's enough talent. It's just about balancing it out to make sure it stays competitive for all the parties. But I would love the first pick. Who would you take if we had the first pick next year? Any other opinions on that? Yeah. Do you like her too? Yeah.
Juju? But she has to do 3 years, right? She'll be going to her sophomore year next year. She was a freshman. She's played 1 year.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's another thing that I don't think is fair, but there's a lot of things.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for mentioning Title IX. I was 12, so I got to go from play dates to competition, so it was great. Question for you. We've got 2 of the best legends in this Bay Area. We've got Steph Curry. We've got Tara Vanderveer. So tell us how you're going to use the GOATs.
I was with Tara yesterday, which feels impossible to sit on a stage next to her. Her Tara-isms were out in full force, right? So imagine this, and then she's just on this you're like, just let her go. You know, we had a really candid conversation. We would love her to be involved in what we're building. You know, she is such a testament to and has paved the way for so many of us that are here today, you know, in her tenacity, in her resilience, in her winning attitude, and you know, her respect that she shows to others and those show to her. So we love her. And then Steph, you know, we couldn't ask for a better person and ally simply just by being at Golden State. If, you know, those of you that may not follow the NBA or Steph, which I don't think is anybody, but in case you don't, Not only was he on the stage with Sabrina and, you know, an incredible leader in that moment of ensuring that the language that he used, the body language that he used, et cetera, was them as equals. And he believes that, by the way. Like, it's very genuine. Then you listen to interviews he has. There was one I was listening to with him talking about comparisons of him and Caitlin Clark. And somebody was going back and forth about, she's just like you. And he said, wait a minute, she's actually much better at a few things than I am. That language from somebody of his stature and power and success that he has is so powerful. And he is a real ally. And so just him being here, playing in the same building, you know, that alone is a statement to this region. Like, it is. It's just who we are here, and he exemplifies that, and we look forward to complementing that with our talent, too.
Great. Thank you.
And only because you mentioned Tara. So we're a national organization, so to give the Bay Area love, just so you know, we actually have a fellowship that's named after Tara. So it's a women's coaches fellowship that we actually give grants to up-and-coming female coaches of all sports. And we actually grant universities to make sure they hire a female who is going to coach a women's sport. And that is named and built with Tara. So it came out of here.
The fun thing to add from my time with her yesterday was I was like, you know, we're building this brand. We want your fans to be fans of ours. She's like, yeah. But, like, how can I help you win?
That's
you know,
so
she
Tara.
is just so, I mean, she is amazing.
Quick question. Is there any chance that she could be the head coach?
She made it very apparent that she's very retired.
Very retired, okay.
She
Well,
only
we'll
was asked like 6 times yesterday, and she's like, no. So she spoke for herself there.
Tara's ready to just be water skiing.
That's fair. That's fair.
I think the GOAT is allowed to finally retire.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. My question comes, I think, from the context. I'm the sports psychologist for Stanford Athletics, work with Stanford women's basketball. And so I think my question comes more from the wellness perspective. I think we all can acknowledge that our athletes are more than just athletes. I think for me as a person and for me as a professional, tending to our athletes' humanity is like an important piece. And so I think just curious about what efforts our organization is going to make to tending towards our athletes' health and wellness, and how we're prioritizing that moving forward.
It'll be a top priority, right? These athletes are expected to be elite performers. And any of us that have good days and not so good days, like, we know what our own flow state is and what makes us our elite selves, and then take that times so much more when you add in what's expected of them physically, right? And then you add in, you know, the gender and how they identify as well, and what that experience is like for them, at what life stage they're in, right? Anything from I'm older, so my joints hurt, to I decided to become a mom and was capable of doing that and did so. How are we supporting those athletes through every layer of, you know, who they choose to be in this world is really, really important to us. And that's individual and cohesive, right? That comes with a culture of both in the locker room and outside of it. We want to be, I need to find better words for it, but like very aggressively inclusive. You know, like, you know, it's not just accepted and like should be done. It's like, no, this is who we are, and this is how we take care of our own.
And only because you teed this up, and this is for everybody, not just the W family, but one of our bread and butters is research. And so coincidentally, next week we are launching the first mental health research project on girls playing sports and the importance of it. So that'll all happen obviously during Mental Health Awareness Month, but it's meant to be a tool for every community. So if you're a youth coach coaching basketball, really understanding the environment and the importance of the right environment for girls. But the most positive side is we are aware that there are some toxic environments. We try to talk about the positive sides, that it still shows that when girls play sports, it is a massive improvement to their mental health. So pay attention to that, use it. They're free tools for everybody. So hopefully that'll be helpful for all of you that are coaches out there, teachers out there, policymakers out there, because we want to really prove how important sports are for girls.
Yeah. And one other layer to that is social media can be a really gross place. It can also be a really powerful place. And I think a lot of the strength we see is because the athletes have their own platforms and voices that all of us can follow now too. But there's a lot of tools that also allow us to mitigate what the players would see about people sharing things to them, right? It's bizarre how many terrible things, you know, people feel comfortable saying on the internet. I love her. Her outfit was so good.
This is a question, I guess, for Jess or anybody. In terms of the fan experience, you mentioned that the market or the type of a person who goes to a game or watches a game is not exactly the same as the NBA and the WNBA. And I've been to a couple of Warriors games recently, and I haven't been to a WNBA game since the Monarchs, I think. But I'm just wondering about, I mean, personally, I find at the Warriors it's like extremely loud and very like almost, you know, so, well, I'm not sure I have the words, but I think you know what I mean. I'm wondering if you are thinking about, because the people or the market's a little bit different, if the fan experience is going to be somewhat different, and in what way?
Yeah, that is something that we will definitely be spending time on before we make decisions, to your point. We're collecting those deposits, and those are the people we're going to listen to. We're going to be putting together a survey here soon, asking them questions. What do they want to see from us? What does the ticketing experience feel like for them? And at some point when we have our season ticket holder base, we're also going to ask, what does game day mean to you? Right? And I think it's really important there's, you know, sometimes in women's sports too, it becomes a little gimmicky, in my opinion. You know, so how are we using the time we have with that community in a really powerful and fun way around the sport? But from the sound perspective, you know, we'll definitely ask those questions, right? I think the opportunity to highlight musical artists, female DJs, those kinds of things are really cool. But we want the game experience to be something that our fans are really wanting to do. And I'm a big fan of, if it hasn't been done before, who cares? So, like, if we like it, like, let's try it.
So just by a show of hands, who has made a deposit for season tickets? Nice. Yeah, and you're doing it right now.
Didn't know you could do it yet. I'm glad to hear.
All right.
I'm glad to hear I can do this now. I did not know.
All right, we have time maybe for like 2 more questions. Okay, in the back.
Hi there. Oh, wow, that's loud. So kind of bouncing off the first question, I know she asked about Oakland and all that, but I just can't help it. You guys took the Golden State name, and I think with that, there's kind of like a synonymous thing with the Bay Area and how much you interact with it. So I'm kind of curious with this, right? Like as an Oakland sports fan, I've lost 3 teams in the past. How many years has it been? When did the Raiders leave? Like 6 years? Are you guys prepared to invest like more and more time, you know, events, things like that for women's basketball as well to slowly kind of rebuild that trust with the community? Because I mean, I can understand having a new market and hearing things like that, but like 4 years ago, Dave Cavall ran a Rooted in Oakland campaign, and he told me he's playing in Sacramento next season. So I guess to kind of like rebuild that trust, rebuild that presence, and to maybe capitalize on some fans who don't really have a team to root for anymore.
First, I'm sorry from a fan perspective. I worked for the A's for many years, by the way, back in the day. So I feel, you know, I spent a lot of time in the Coliseum with the fans, and it was a really, really special environment, too. I plan to go to many games this year just to be there, to be honest. Second, you know, we want to build a genuine relationship, right? It's not about like a flash. We're going to do this to like earn your trust. Like we want to build a brand that everyone feels connected to, and how and where we show up is important. You know, Chase Center is an elite facility that our incredible athletes deserve to play in. And, you know, that's really where that decision came from a game day experience. But the city of Oakland, you know, absolutely. You know, we are thinking through what events look like, how we are supporting and highlighting small businesses, et cetera. But we're going to do that versus talk about it. You know, like I don't want to sit up here and tell you I'm rooted in Oakland. I want to sit up here and just say, like, it's important to us, and you're going to see us start to show up there.
I also think it's really important for Northern California to embrace this team, because in the NBA there are rules. Like Sacramento Kings and Warriors can't market to each other. Like this is the only WNBA team in all of Northern California. Like Northern California needs to own this team. It's huge. So that's what I'm hopeful for. Like I'm a Bay Area, Northern California resident, and I've lived in multiple parts. Like this is our team. And I think this is what is the cool opportunity, because it's the only team that's here for the WNBA, and I hope all of Northern California embraces this team, because I think there's going to be fans coming from a lot of places.
All right, one more question. You?
Hi. First of all, thank you guys so much for being here. This is amazing. the first BFC game was not only a month ago, and I think the magic that everyone felt in that stadium was insane. And we know that this is going to feel exactly the same, so thank you guys so much. One thing that I think, Jess, you said that really stuck with me is like when brands show up for this, it's so much bigger than the sport. It's them showing up for women in the community and everything. And I think when I was watching WSL games and WNBA games, like you see tampon commercials, like you feel seen in a way that you've never felt before in engaging with sports. And I know the WNBA, for example, signed a deal with like Opill, I think for like a multi-year birth control. So I'm curious, like it almost feels a little counterproductive to say that like the expectation is the brand deals only have to be with female like facing brands, right? Because this is a business and like there do need to be brands across the board, but there is a level of just trust and awareness and showing up for women and seeing the brand deals that are brands that we've never had deals with before. So I'm curious how you guys navigate on brand deals, working with brands that are female and women specific versus working with brands overall that objectively can bring the business money and kind of get their brand where it needs to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really thoughtful question because it's something I think about every day. The reality is the audience of women's sports right now is 50% men, 50% women, right? And I think that's really powerful as you're thinking through what types of brands should we be thinking about and showing them that we have their audience here today. But even though it's 50% men and 50% women, showcasing women's products, I mean, how many of us have seen a Viagra commercial? Like, right? A lot of them, right? Yeah. So showcasing women's products and especially things that are menstrual products, et cetera, like make that normal to your point in our overall society, regardless of just targeting women, right? Tampon commercials are not only for women, they're just an acknowledgement of something that's needed every 28 days in someone's life. And so I think as you're approaching the brand conversations, it's everybody. And I think what you're seeing happen right now is you're actually seeing a lot of brands who never have done sports marketing come into women's sports because it is a different product. It is that mix of sport, purpose, pop culture. So beauty brands are like, well, I want to redefine beauty. Like I want people to know that beauty doesn't just mean you look like this. Beauty means maybe you really enjoy wearing a specific, face cream or just lipstick or none of it at all, but you respect that everybody else gets to do that, right? Those are really fun conversations to have. I'm having a couple really cool corporate conversations right now that I think would make quite a statement of inclusivity, of just representation. And so I think that's the opportunity at hand that candidly men's sports can't offer the same way women's sports can. And like any sales product process, scarcity creates demand, creates dollars, right? So how are we creating a product worthy of those conversations? And that's on me and on us to do that. I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's very important. Like I say, I want to grow the ocean. I'm very happy with the amount of brands and advertisers that are wanting to focus on women's sports, but it's important that that grows into many more diverse brands. And as Jess described, we have a male and female fan base, and we also need our male allies. I see a lot of them in this room. Like women's sports should be for everybody. And I think there are opportunities. Like I'll give an example of one of our partners. So we worked closely with Frito-Lay. They were going to launch Cracker Jill with Cracker Jack. But our role with Cracker Jill was all about what the female athletes look like, their shapes of their bodies, representation. I like to remind people, a shot putter looks a lot different than a marathon runner. And that is something that's really important. We have Paralympic athletes. Like when we look at female athletes, we look at right now we're talking about one of the elite leagues, a very popular sport in women's basketball, but we care about everything. Fencing, we don't care what women's sport it is. We want to make sure that representation is there and that it's done accurately with brands. And I think that's what Jess is describing. So when we have the opportunity to lean into products and opportunities to really represent women, we want them to represent women. And I think that's something that is really important, but it's just as important to have male allies and male brands in the space because it's also that combination of lifting everything up because we have a 50-50 fan base.
Jess and Danette, thank you so much for taking the time. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you. Just some housekeeping things. If you're exiting, please use this back door. If you need the restroom or you want to drop your dishes in the dish pit to help our baristas in the front, just go that way. The night's event was run by some amazing staff. Luis and Annie were running the event tonight. Shout out to y'all.
In the front, you were served by Griffin, Felipe, and Josh. And yes, feel free to see me if you have any questions, and go to welcometomanny's.com for all our upcoming events. But thanks, y'all.